Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
The Men in the Woods. Just some background first. I live in the East Coast, northeast to be exact. Town I live in has a Freemasons lodge right in its downtown portion, but I've never seen anybody go in or leave. A friend of mine who worked with a Freemason, probably belonged to that lodge, was a real creep. Sexually harassed one of his co-workers on his last day of work. Nothing ever came of it, oddly enough. The aforementioned friend works for this really rich guy who owns a large portion of the town, neighboring one of the towns I live in and where this story takes place. Town is the rural counterpart of my town, and a lot of businesses are linked together. The neighboring town is rural but homes a high-class business that makes products that some of the richest people in the world buy. The aforementioned rich guy owns a lot of private trails. I can go on because I know someone who works closely with his company and has a wide array of businesses that span a good amount of industries. My town has an annual alien festival to commemorate a semi-famous alien sighting that happened there. There are a good amount of businesses that nobody quite knows who owns them, i.e. the country club. At least that's what I've heard through town workers I've talked with. If you're smart, you can find the town's name. Okay, story time. It was the mid-2010s back when I was in high school. I used to take night walks and night drives as I had pretty bad insomnia at the time. I never quite drove downtown though, because there were always cops sitting late into the night, early morning, trying to catch speeders or whatnot. That's how I first encountered the people in the woods. The first encounter was when I was walking along a road next to an old mill turned apartment complex, just listening to music as usual and minding my own business when I saw on my left, standing at the old concrete foundation of a long ago demolished building, about 5 big figures standing on it in a circle. They were just swaying with the wind back and forth. I don't really remember their clothes, but I do remember the smell. Even from the distance where I was standing, I could smell it. Smelt sweet, but not like candy. Like meat left in the hot sun for too long. I didn't see what they were standing around, but I didn't want to alert them if they were just a bunch of heroin addicts doing their thing. So I just kept on walking. When I circled my route, they were gone, but the smell remained. I didn't stop to check out the area though. I've always had a keen intuition that seems to keep me safe, and that moment I felt my ears get that weird feeling that always comes with being watched. When I returned the next day to the concrete foundation, the middle of it seemed cleaner than the rest. I could still somewhat smell bleach, but under that was that same sweet scent. I changed my night route after that. That area since has been redone into large apartment buildings, and that concrete foundation has long been removed. Next encounter. I find night drives really relaxing for some reason. Put on some dark wave music and just drive down foreign roads at night. I usually go to that neighboring town because the rural roads are so twisting and interesting. Plus, there's only one cop patrolling the whole area at any given time. My second encounter was quick, but nonetheless weird. I was driving past the area where my friend works, when an animal ran quickly past the road. My eyes followed, and that's when I saw them. More than 10 people just a little bit in the woods with their back towards the road, all linking arms in a line, swaying like they were singing, but there was no sound except my car and the rustling of the trees. Freaked me out. Probably the scariest encounter for me was when I was running the trails behind my high school. This was the only time I saw them in the day. My high school is off some rural road next to a large forest. So as I said, I was just running and making sure I didn't trip on a route or get lost. That's when I felt that same weird sensation of being watched. I looked around when I saw him. Some asshole a fair distance away was just standing there. He was far enough that I didn't see his face, but he was just swaying back and forth, back and forth. I basically tactically shit my pants and hauled ass back to my car. Nothing else happened that day. My final encounter was sort of the one that really stuck with me. Now I used to live a short walk away from a small little forest type area, so at this time, I had really increased my night walks and drives. So I was just walking the outskirts of this forest area. There's a country club right next to the forest area where I usually walk the grounds at night. This was one of those nights. I distinctly remember it due to a large hunter's moon resting in the sky that night. The air felt really thick like I was walking through water, and I generally had a bad feeling all around. At this point in my walks, I carried a pretty good-sized knife on my walks then. My walk went pretty well actually, besides that weird feeling that the air had. Well, until I got back near the entrance. That's when I saw him, or rather heard him. I heard a branch snap somewhere behind me. Behind me, on my now right side, was a man. He was far closer than any figure I had seen before. He was holding a snapped branch. Kinda at his shoulder height, the branch was broken right down the middle and each hand was holding the ends of it. He was just wearing everyday clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, and a watch. His face, though, was completely blank, no emotion at all, and his eyes, though facing me, seemed to look right past me, like I wasn't even there. For some reason, I had this strange feeling like I was being warned. I didn't really know for what, but I had a distinct feeling it was a warning, and that this man did not intend to hurt me, at least not yet. What also freaked me out was that I didn't really sense him. That sounds weird, but like I said, I have a really good sense of intuition. I can tell pretty consistently when someone is lying, I'm in danger, being watched, and etc. I didn't fucking sense this guy at all, and I think that's what he wanted me to know. It also freaked me out how the area was kinda close to where I lived, like he somehow knew where I lived. I stopped taking night walks and drives, moved away a couple of years later for college.
Is this in New Hampshire?
Good guess.
I hail from New Hampshire, and where I used to live had a large Freemasonic presence. Many temples and absolutely zero activity around them.
Yeah, it's really weird. I know people who have run into them and even seen one car with a Mason sigil sticker on its back. Never seen a lodge populated, though.
I'm almost inclined to head out on a night drive in the backcountry here to figure some of it out for myself. The reason nothing ever comes of this kind of wacky shit is because of the fact that, well, people are afraid to find out the truth.
Same, but I don't want to just poof out of the face of the earth. That rich guy I was talking about gives large donations to the town and police department. Also, the local department is utterly incompetent and I wouldn't trust them to save a cat from a tree. I just kinda don't want to get involved. A lot of weird shit happens out of view and no one seems to be aware. Back then I felt like I was getting more attention from people I really shouldn't be. I don't know why I was left off with a warning though.
Exeter. Now what's with the red light?
Just things that happen sometimes. Weird lighting and clouds are somewhat common. There's a good amount of towers that blink red at night. Probably cell towers though. I've had experience with lights in the woods though. However, it was always a good distance away. So if it's just lone hikers or whatnot, I can't be sure. As in most small towns, most roads and places are empty late into the night. When there are actual people out driving, they're usually tailgating assholes. Just in my experience. I have some other happening stories too from the place if anyone is interested.
My wife's godparents live in Rye. I love it there and it's a stone's throw from Exeter. Always wanted to go to the White Mountains where Betty and Barney Hill were abducted.
Finishing up some work, but I'll give you guys a quick story. Old concrete plant that's been left abandoned for decades. Rests right next to the rec center where a lot of the school system used to bring kids for events. One day the whole plant lights up in a fire. Proper authorities go to put it out. They find the corpse of a woman inside. Takes days to identify her. Apparently worked for the hospital or something. Made some local newspapers, but nobody really talked about it. Last I remember, some homeless man was to blame or something. The mill was coincidentally demolished soon after, and now apartment complexes rest where it used to lay. I don't get why they keep putting ugly apartment complexes over these abandoned places. I have some other stories of missing people and strange deaths in the area that I can post later. Also, this time way back where I saw some shady shit. Returning from college, driving around minding my old business around midday or something. See up ahead 2 cars on either lane parked next to each other. The cars were the same exact type of black SUVs. The people in the car seemed to be talking to each other from their driver's windows. As I was driving up to them, the SUV in the other lane started to drive off and their counterpart made a quick U-turn in the middle of the road. Both of them drove off pretty quickly. I also noticed a helicopter flying about around the area and some state trooper cars parked around town as well. Turned out someone burned down a house or trailer somewhere around town, and so I just put 2 and 2 together. Still find it weird that there was such a huge police presence for just a case of arson. Seeing a helicopter around isn't too strange, though. There's a military base a few miles from the town, so I assume they're coming and going from the base. Still, that helicopter was far closer than the other usual. You could hear it while driving around, circulating the area above you. Some of these are just local stories by longtime townies. Here's one from the 1900s, a woman that lived alone near the old golf course. One day she just vanished without a trace. Don't know how long the time passed, but if my memory was correct, it was a couple of weeks. Her body ended up on one of the major roads outside of the town. Her whole body was chopped up into chunks and just left there. Nobody ever caught the person who did it. I've heard this story from a couple of people, but I've never seen any documentation of it or stories online. One disappearance that I know is true is that a girl vanished around the 80s. Think her name was Tammy or something. Walked home alone from school every day. School is located close to the downtown area. On her way home, she just vanished. Her remains and body were never found. While there were suspects, nobody ever got prosecuted. Kinda reminds me of the high turnover rate at our town school. Both private and public, a lot of teachers quit or are forced to. There have been multiple cases of teachers harassing students, both at the prestigious private school and public ones. It creeps me out. What always somewhat bothered me about the place was just the massive amount of private land owned by a select few people. Not developed land either. Just huge forests with private trails that run through them. Most of them aren't even on any maps or really known to the public, let alone open to them. You just have to wonder why people need that much land if they aren't doing anything with it.
Really freaked out by the figure in the woods by my childhood home. Please help me, I don't exactly know what happened to me in the woods by my house. Sorry, I've never used 4chan. I don't really use the internet much anyway, so bear with me. I don't know if most of the threads here are real or just for fun, but I'm in the middle of a nervous breakdown over what happened to me last week. I told my cousin and he recommended this place to me. Something happened to me in the forest that I can't explain and now I can't sleep. First, some background. It's pretty important. Mind you, I don't know if several things are happening here that are coincidental or what. So be critical because I could be conflating things in a panic. I grew up in a small town outside Tacoma, Washington. I'd share the location, but that'd be a pretty narrow location to find my house, so sorry, I'll have to pass. It's not quite a suburban town, so our house butts up against a couple thousand acres of dense woodland. Me, being a shitty little kid since I was 12, I've spent a lot of time in these woods, ran from cops through them, walked home from friends' houses drunk alone at night, tripping mushrooms in them. I've done it all. Point being, I know about 1/3 of the woods closest to my house like the back of my hand. The trail system goes really deep, and I've walked it a few times, but not enough to know it well. I'd also like to point out that I'm no square. I've walked home through those woods alone in pitch black with no light or cell phone. I was an Eagle Scout, so the wild never bothered me much. Although I have to admit the place started to creep me out after this kid I went to high school with hung himself there. That's a weird story. There's got to be something in the local newspaper about this. Several years ago there was a family with 4 boys. I think the oldest one died in Afghanistan. Then every year after, the next oldest committed suicide. The youngest one just so happened to do it in these woods, close to my house too. The reason I know where is because the yellow rope was tied to the tree for years after. After this, I got some weird feelings when I went through there. I actually stopped walking through it at night. We all did mushrooms in there once and freaked out, so I only took my dog in there during the day really after. A couple other things to note are the insane amount of dead animal debris, the strange noises I hear, and all the local sightings. First, the debris. This is crazy. I always seem to remember seeing dead animal bits, piles of fur, bones, bird carcasses, whatever. Every time I went in there, I would see stuff. It was almost like a game after a while. What am I going to see this time on my smoke walk? Next, the noises. I know what coyotes sound like. I occasionally hear packs of them howl. I hear owls, dogs, and frogs too, since my house is next to a pond also. But a few times I've heard this really strange sound. It's hard to explain, almost like there's 2 tones to it. One is guttural and sounds real primal. The other is a kind of mid-tone humming sound, and it's punctuated by some sharp cackles almost. And it's really loud. I only remember it so well because it actually woke me up once when I was younger and scared the bejesus out of me. Another strange thing in hindsight is the odd number of animal sightings we have had. I've heard of everything from cougars, bears, mountain lions, wolves, and even some people claim they've seen Bigfoot around here. I actually saw a crazy big wolf on the other side of town, but that's another story. I'm not sure if it's just bored housewives or overprotective housewives or what, but I think pets have gone missing, so that's probably why it's a big deal. Anyway, eventually I moved away to go to college. Every time I've been back, it's been winter, and I never really cared to go outside. Well, this time I'm here in the summer, and I decided to go on a nice walk for old time's sake. Side note, I was legally blind growing up, and I've recently had surgery to correct that, so I've taken to birding and wildlife spotting. All of my friends were busy, so I decided to have another one of my solo adventures. It was already getting a little late, so I really didn't plan on going on a long trek. But once I got out, it was so nice. The birds are active in the evenings and the light hits the trees just right, so I was really enjoying walking further into the forest, observing the area. Something caught my eye after a while, though. I kept seeing signs of animals being killed, like everywhere, a dozen or more times scattered through some miles of trails. But I figured, hey, animals gotta eat too. Sunsets are my favorite part, so I somewhat irresponsibly stayed out too late and too deep into the trails. I had a general idea of where I was, but I wasn't worried. I had even grabbed a flashlight from my dad's shop, so I thought I'd be fine. I tried to turn it on, but it kept flickering like the battery was loose or something. My dumbass should have tested it first. By the time I was really heading back, though, it had gotten darker way quicker than I anticipated. I began to realize I took a wrong turn on my way back because I wasn't recognizing the terrain this time. I still knew the general direction, so I thought I was fine. Now there's a couple stream systems running through here, and I was kind of walking down this valley, so I figured there must be some extension of the stream nearby. Why did I think this, you ask? The smell. At first it was faint, and it reminded me of another spot close to my house I knew of where this stream pooled up in a really gross and mucky puddle. That shit smells kinda nasty. The further I walked through, the worse it got, and it stung my nostrils. It was sickly sweet, and earthy at the same time, like decomposing I'm a bog. It was so bad I lost focus, and right when I reached the bottom of the valley, I hit a tree root and fell forward right into my hand. I almost felt embarrassed for a minute, and then I saw something. Off in the distance, up the hill, I thought I could see something. It looked red, like a piece of fabric in a beach chair, or maybe a windbreaker or something. Curiously, I reached for my flashlight. Totally forgot the flashlight was messed up. What I saw in that strobe of light will haunt me forever. I don't know what it was, but there was a big figure, something tall and wide. It was standing behind the red object, and as soon as I illuminated it, it moved, and fast. I didn't have time to investigate what the red object was. I was running. I don't think I ran that fast when the cops chased me after egging their car. I was hitting trails, instinctually taking forks and not looking back. Blackberry bushes messed my face up. I tripped on a rock and in that split second had a heart attack because I heard more rumbling in the bushes behind me. I don't think I've ever gone from prone to full-on sprint before that moment. Eventually I saw a row of lights. I knew it had to be a neighborhood. I straight up had no idea where I was, but I wasn't going to spend any second longer in that forest than I had to. I could find a trailhead to the neighborhood, but it was so close I could see it through about 10 yards of blackberry bushes. God damn it. I dove straight in with no second thought and hopped that wooden fence instantly. I was in someone's backyard, so I headed straight for their fence. Boom, I was in the middle of some neighborhood. I later found out it was about 11:30 p.m., but I knew I had to get help. As soon as I started running for the neighbor's door, I saw headlights on the trees at the top of the hill. They must have thought I was a refugee. I damn near collapsed in front of their car, and this man got out of the car. Thank the Lord I didn't have to look like a lunatic banging in someone's door so late, at least. He looked like he had seen a ghost, I assume by the look of me. My shirt was ripped and covered in dirt. My arms and face and body were scratched to shit, and my hands and chin were busted from biffing. He kept asking me what happened to me, and all I could do was beg him to take me out of there. He insisted I get in his back seat as his petrified-looking wife, fresh off of too many drinks after date night, stared in shock. She must be a wild one because she just turned to me and asked, "What the hell happened to you?" I started crying, and I just told them I was attacked and chased through the woods, and all I wanted to do was go home. They kind of sat there, and I assumed no verbally debated about what to do. The husband put the car in drive without talking and pulled out. They turned out to be really nice, good conversation. They could tell I was severely rattled, so they were cool about it. He kept insisting I file a police report if someone tried to rob me in an adjacent neighborhood, and I kept telling him I would after getting some rest. There's no way I could tell these people what actually happened. I will say, in the week since, I've heard that weird-ass guttural noise twice. It paralyzes me every time now. I don't know what happened, if that was Bigfoot or some spiritual shit or haunting or woodland nymphs or whatever, I don't know. I'm really freaked out if you couldn't tell by the mountain of text I just stress-typed. Thanks, I'm gonna go get shit-faced now as it's the only thing that helps me sleep. I'll check back tomorrow, TLDR. Saw some creepy shit in some creepy woods and now I've developed alcoholism.
I encountered something yesterday and have no idea how to handle it. Living in Northern Virginia, about a half hour from the nearest town, not quite in a woods but close. Mowing the lawn next to the house while listening to music and letting my dogs run around. The mower is a piece of shit. It constantly stalls out and I gotta screw with it to restart it. Halfway done when it stalls, go to fix it. I realize the dogs are barking at something, take out my headphones and look around. See my wife standing at the tree line on the opposite side of the yard, just staring at me. Some background. My wife is in the National Guard, so she's gone one weekend a month. This was her drill weekend, so she'd been gone since Friday. I'd been texting her, and she said they would be released soon. When I start looking at her, she turns and walks into the trees. Call out to her, but she doesn't stop. Lose sight of her. Dogs continue losing their shit. At this point, I'm really confused. She wasn't in uniform and didn't even acknowledge me. Her car isn't in the driveway either. I was mowing not 10 feet from where we parked them. Call out again and walk closer to the tree line. Forest is too thick to see, though it is very far. She vanished on a path that leads to a small pond about a mile away. At this point, I'm pissed, figuring it's her playing some kind of joke. Call after her for a few minutes. Don't see her again. All the dogs have stopped barking at the woods and are just scratching at the door of the house wanting inside. I decide to go after her, so I get all the dogs in so they don't run off while I'm not looking. Start heading down the path. It's easy going since it's downhill toward the pond, though the forest is kinda dense so the light isn't great. Walk slow for about 5 minutes looking for her, waiting for her to jump out or something stupid, don't see her anywhere. Pull out my phone and try to call her. She doesn't answer after 3 calls, so I hang up and go to text her. Just then, I got a text from her. I can't talk now. We are being released in a few minutes, so I'll call you then. Stare at it for a minute, trying to process this. I look up and not 30 feet down the path is my wife, just standing and staring at me, expression completely blank. I take a step towards her and ask what the hell Shay is doing. I realize the clothes she's wearing are covered in soot and burn marks, like she grabbed them from the hole we burn trash in. Suddenly I get a whiff of this awful smell, like rotting meat and copper. She opens her mouth and lets loose this horrible crying sound. It sounds like a woman screaming and sobbing her guts out. Doesn't sound anything like my wife's voice. Her expression doesn't change at all. It's completely blank aside from her mouth moving. I take a step back and suddenly she starts sprinting at me, never stopping. I turn and book it, jumping logs and dodging branches, the whole time that sobbing and crying following behind me. The sound changes into this horrible yowling, like someone was skinning a mountain lion alive. Finally, I reach the end of the path, dash across the yard and up to the door. The screaming stops and I look behind me and see it standing at the edge of the yard, just staring again. It doesn't look like my wife anymore. Its mouth is way too large and its eyes don't look right. I go and grab our shotgun, but when I check back outside, it's gone. Now, early this morning, I was leaving for work down our driveway when I swear I saw a woman with black hair standing in the middle of the driveway. She ran into the woods when my headlights illuminated her, and I heard that awful yowling as she did. How fucked am I? Any chance this thing will just leave on its own? How do I tell my wife about this? This the first time you've ever dealt with this thing, or has this happened before?
Is this the first time you've ever dealt with this thing, or has this happened before?
First time I've seen it has been yesterday and today. Dogs are acting nervous too, the way they do when there's a bear or something nearby.
/x/ I don't see a lot of green texts here, and I am very excited to share a story. If you would, I'm looking for a way to explain this. I don't know what it is, so I came to the part of the internet where there are people who actually believe in the paranormal and aren't Facebook moms, so some background info. I'm a German teen living in a town about 30 to 50 kilometers from the next big city. I'm also slightly overweight. A few years ago, I had the hobby of making swords out of wood, and I made a huge wooden anime-type sword, just a slab of wood that's edged with a big handle. Over the years, I've actually managed to carry it on my back and one-hand it for short periods without hurting myself too much. About 500 meters to 1 kilometer from my house, there begins the woods. At one edge, there's a large swamp, about 2 meters deep or so, and on the other, just a clear way into the woods. The woods spans about 5 or 7 kilometers from what I can tell. So the actual experience, I heard that going outside was a good way to lose weight. Decide to take the huge sword with me because why not? Get on boots, sweater, and my hat and walk to the woods. It's about 6 p.m. and the sun is starting to settle. So I'm spending about a good hour or two in the woods, smacking the sword against some small trees and broken twigs. Occasionally sprint through the forest because I've heard high-intensity sprinting helps burn fat. About 18:30, I'm guessing, the forest starts to become quite dark. I don't believe in the supernatural, so meh, I thought. Although I don't want to be kidnapped or lynched by some wackos. As I slowly start to make my way home, I realize I have a long way to walk. Power through it anyway. After I've been waking for a while, it happens. My foot suddenly makes a frying noise and I'm a good foot shorter. Swamp. I pull my foot out, thank God the boot's still there. As I make my way around the swamp, I hear cracking of leaves and the sound of bubbles popping and shit. I'm walking through the woods and I hear the bubbling of the swamp. Nothing unusual. It does that sometimes, I guess. Until a good minute or two later, I feel watched. Shutter.mp3. I'm pretty sure it's nothing, so I continue through. I was wrong. On the wayside, there was a dead deer, stomach open and everything. I was about to barf and wanted to get away. Wait a minute, what could have killed something that big? Wolves. Doubt it considering they're so rare. I decided not to think about it and hurried home. Same shit again, this time on a branch. The innards are actually hanging from the tree. But there in the bush behind it I see something. A rhythmic movement of contracting muscles. It looks like breathing. Because I'm a fucking dumb, I draw the large sword and gonna check it out. I poke the tip in and the leaves rustle. Okay. As I stand there, I see it from the corner of my eye. Something. I don't remember any details, but it looked bird-like, almost like a mix of bird and cat. 3 pairs of legs and large legs. Its posture looks like a cricket, and it doesn't have any eyes. Almost shit myself. It moves towards me. Nope. Practically swing the sword at Mach speed into the thing. Spin around by sheer force of the thing. After I gather myself, I see its frail legs or arms. One of them is limp and bent. I fucking hit it. I smack again and run out of the forest as fast as I can without looking back. I can hear it screeching and follow me for a couple of meters until it just vanishes. I remember it was covered in moss or something, frail, furless legs. I don't know what I saw, but I need answers, please. I'm scared to live here. I know some of you believe me and are plenty knowledgeable about this. Here I drew what I think I saw. Up here, forgot to mention, this was a few days ago and I don't want to go back into those woods. I don't care if you want pics or something. I'm not going back there again.
Do you know of any myths or legends that may be similar to what you encountered?
Fuck if I know. There's a Bavarian myth of an animal that's many animals mixed into one.
Sounds like a monster to me. They are scary, but they aren't physical. Though in certain altered state, such as elevated fear in a dark forest, they can appear as physical. Most likely something from local myth or legend, not an expert on Germany mythology.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.